My name is Catherine Walsh, and if you told me a year ago that I'd be homeless at 35, I would have laughed in disbelief. But here I am. It all started with a promise, a hollow one from my mother-in-law, Grace. She begged me to sell my house to save my sister-in-law, Amanda, from financial ruin, assuring me we'd live together as one big happy family. 2 weeks later, I found my belongings stuffed into trash bags on her front porch. Looking back, the warning signs were glaring, but I ignored them. It began 3 months ago at one of Grace's infamous Sunday dinners. Amanda sat at the table, eyes puffy and red, while Grace loomed over her like a general rallying her troops. "It's just been so hard since Tom left," Amanda wailed, dabbing her face theatrically with a monogrammed napkin. "The gambling debts. I can't handle it anymore." Her sobs tugged at my sympathy, even though they felt just a touch too polished, like a scene from a soap opera. Amanda's husband had walked out 6 months ago, leaving her saddled with massive, secret debts. The drama of it all was vintage Amanda. "The lawyers say bankruptcy is my only option," she continued, her voice trembling. "I'll lose everything, the house, the car, even Mom's antique collection." Grace's grip on Amanda's shoulder tightened as she turned her hawk-like gaze to me. "We can't let that happen, can we, Catherine? Family helps family." I hesitated, offering a noncommittal nod, but the knot in my stomach tightened. Grace had that gleam in her eye, the same one she'd worn when she convinced my husband, Mark, to loan Amanda $20,000 from our wedding fund. We never saw a dime of it back. "You know," Grace said, her voice syrupy with false sweetness, "Catherine, your house is so big for just you and Mark. Why not sell it? The market's fantastic right now." I nearly choked on my wine. "Sell our house? But think about it." Grace cut me off smoothly. "You could help Amanda wipe the slate clean. Everyone could live here together, one big happy family. Imagine the savings on utilities and upkeep." Mark shifted uneasily beside me. "Mom, that's a huge decision. We need to." "Of course, darling," Grace cooed, but her tone dripped with urgency. "It's just that Amanda's bankruptcy hearing is in 2 weeks. Time is of the essence." Over the following days, Grace bombarded us with calls, oscillating between guilt-tripping and thinly veiled accusations of selfishness. "I just don't understand how you could let your own family suffer," she'd say, her disappointment unmistakable. Mark, ever the peacekeeper, tried to stay neutral, but Grace was relentless. Eventually, under the crushing weight of guilt and obligation, we caved. We listed my dream home, the one I'd worked so hard to buy, and it sold almost instantly. The day we handed Amanda the check for $90,000, Grace was practically glowing. "This is what family does," she declared, pulling Amanda into a hug that excluded me entirely. We moved into Grace's modest home, cramming our lives into her guest room. I tried to stay optimistic. "This is temporary," I told Mark, more to convince myself. "We'll rebuild." But the cracks in Grace's big happy family fantasy started showing almost immediately. Amanda's gratitude seemed superficial, and I often caught her exchanging whispers with Grace. Bit by bit, our belongings migrated from the guest room to the garage, one box at a time. I brushed it off, desperate to keep the peace. Until the day it all came crashing down. On a rainy Tuesday morning, I opened the front door to find my life stuffed into garbage bags and my place in the family erased. That rainy Tuesday morning, I returned from a grueling hospital shift to find my life in ruins. Every single one of our belongings sat in garbage bags on Grace's front porch, soaking in the cold drizzle. A bright yellow note fluttered on the door, its cheerful color mocking the words scrawled in bold, unapologetic handwriting. "Found a better use for the guest room. Grace." My hands trembled as I stared at the mess. I fumbled for my phone, my voice shaking as I called Mark. "They've thrown us out," I managed, tears blurring my vision. "All our things air." "That's impossible," Mark interrupted. Mom wolded. His words faltered, replaced by muffled voices in the background. Then I heard Grace's unmistakable tone, sharp and unyielding. "Tell your wife not to make a scene," she said, her voice cutting like a blade. "Amanda needs the guest room for her home office now that she's starting her business." I froze. "Her what?" "Amanda's new business," Grace repeated, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. As if summoned by my disbelief, Amanda's Mercedes glided into the driveway, a sleek, brand-new model that gleamed even in the gray light. gone were the traces of financial ruin she paraded weeks ago. She stepped out in designer clothes, her hair and makeup perfect, a stark contrast to the tearful, bedraggled woman who'd begged for our help. "Oh," she said lightly, spotting me on the porch. "You're still here." Her tone was casual, as though we were old acquaintances running into each other by chance. She glanced at my rain-soaked belongings and winced. "Didn't you see the note? Mom and I decided it'd be best if you and Mark lived separately for a while. So he can focus on family priorities." "Family priorities?" I echoed, my voice hollow. "We sold our house to help you." She laughed then, sharp and cruel, a sound that sliced through the air like a whip. "And I'm so grateful," she said, her smile all teeth. "That money was exactly what I needed to start my luxury spa business. Mom's been helping me plan it for months. She said you'd never agree if you knew the truth, so—" She gave a little shrug, as if the betrayal were a minor inconvenience. "We had to get creative." I stood there stunned as she sidestepped my belongings like they were garbage littering her path. "By the way," she added, pausing at the door, "Mark's staying here. Mom convinced him it's best for everyone. You understand, right?" Through the window, I could see Grace watching us, her arms crossed, a smug smile tugging at her lips. She'd orchestrated everything: the sale of our house, our move into her home, and now this final, calculated blow. The worst part, when I called Mark again, his phone went straight to voicemail. An hour later, a single text buzzed on my screen. "Mom's right. I need time to think. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I stood in the rain, staring at the words until they blurred. My life, my home, my marriage had dissolved in the span of a morning. But as I began loading my drenched belongings into my car, another realization struck me. This wasn't just about money. This was about power and control. A perfectly executed plan to strip me of everything I held dear. But what they hadn't counted on was this: I wasn't powerless. They might have blindsided me, but they'd made one fatal mistake. I had evidence: every text, every email, every lie Grace and Amanda had spun to manipulate us. They thought they'd won, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. What Grace and Amanda didn't realize was that I had a habit of documenting everything. Years as a nurse had taught me the value of meticulous records. Every text, every email, every family meeting filled with thinly veiled manipulation. I had it all saved, including Amanda's drunken confession at last week's dinner about how she and Grace had been planning their so-called investment opportunity for months. My first stop was Sarah's law office. Sarah had been my best friend since college and was now one of the toughest attorneys in town. Sitting in her sleek conference room, still in my damp scrubs, I spread out printed emails, texts, and voice recordings across the table. As Sarah skimmed through the evidence, her eyebrows climbed higher with each page. "This," she said, pointing to a particularly damning email where Grace laid out their scheme, "is textbook fraud. And here, Amanda outright admits the bankruptcy was exaggerated to pressure you into selling." "Can we prove it?" I asked, my voice wavering as I wrung my hands. Sarah smiled, a sharp, predatory grin that I'd seen her flash before big cases. "Oh, we can do better than prove it. Grace's biggest mistake: she put everything in writing." The next morning, Grace's carefully curated world began to unravel. First came the legal notice of fraud charges. Then the police showed up to investigate misappropriation of funds. But the real bombshell came when the local news picked up the story. Overnight, Grace went from a respected socialite to a pariah. "You can't prove anything," Grace sputtered at reporters camped outside her country club, her usual composure cracking. But her defiance crumbled when they played Amanda's recorded confession, broadcasted for everyone to hear. 3 days later, Mark finally called. His voice was shaky, breaking under the weight of guilt. "Kath, I had no idea," he said. "Mom swore she was just helping Amanda get back on her feet. I never thought—" "Save it," I interrupted, my voice cold. "You chose them over me, over us." The court case was swift and devastating, for them. My documentation, coupled with Amanda's loose lips, left no room for doubt. The judge ordered Grace and Amanda to repay the full amount, plus damages. Amanda's spa, built with my stolen money, was seized and sold. Grace's reputation in her precious social circle was destroyed, replaced with whispers of scandal and betrayal. But the fallout didn't stop there. As news spread, other victims of Grace's schemes began to come forward. Amanda's ex-husband. He hadn't abandoned her. Grace had driven him off with similar tactics. 3 other daughters-in-law shared stories of manipulation and financial abuse that mirrored mine. Grace's web of deceit unraveled faster than anyone could have imagined. Today, I'm thriving. I live in a beautiful new condo, paid for with the settlement money. Mark still calls occasionally, pleading for a second chance, but some betrayal was cut too deep to forgive. Yesterday, as I drove past Grace's house, I couldn't help but smile at the large for sale sign staked in the front yard. Karma, as it turns out, has a perfect sense of irony. Losing everything taught me more than I ever thought possible. It showed me my strength and resilience. It proved that the best revenge isn't just getting even, it's rising higher than they ever thought you could. To Grace, the mother-in-law who thought she could break me, thank you. You made me stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. Because I'm not just a survivor, I'm a warrior. And warriors don't just survive, they conquer.